Before you were born, your soul already knew the silence it would inherit. The distance in your father's eyes, the words that never came, the love that stayed locked behind walls of coldness, none of it was random. Maybe you came here to learn what true presence feels like, by first walking through the absence of it. Because sometimes, the pain that seems to break you, is actually the one shaping you into who you were meant to become. What if your father's silence wasn't punishment, but initiation? What if the one who couldn't guide you, was silently guiding you toward your own voice? The soul has its own logic, and it often hides the greatest lessons inside the moments that hurt the most. So, before you reject that silence, pause for a moment. Feel it. Listen. Because that void you've been running from, might be the very space where your own strength was born. Every story begins with a symbol, and in the language of the soul, the father represents direction, the voice that says, "This is the way." But when that voice is absent, when the father becomes a distant figure or a shadow fading at the edge of memory, something inside you starts searching endlessly for orientation. You begin to look for that guiding force in lovers, mentors, systems, anything that promises stability. And yet, the more you search outside, the further you drift from the true compass hidden within. Carl Jung once said that the father is the bridge between the unconscious and the world, the inner archetype that gives shape to our reality. When that bridge is broken, you feel suspended between two worlds, the chaos of emotion and the coldness of reason. You learn to survive without trust, to lead yourself without direction, to love without feeling safe. But deep beneath that confusion, your psyche begins to craft something extraordinary, a new structure built from your own awareness. You see, the modern world is full of people carrying this silent wound. Men and women who grew up with fathers who were physically there, yet emotionally absent. People who confuse independence with isolation, who equate strength with not needing anyone. But strength built on abandonment is fragile. And until this wound is faced, it quietly dictates every decision, who you love, what you fear, and how far you allow yourself to go. The truth is, your soul didn't make a mistake. It chose this pattern so that, through the pain of disconnection, you could rediscover what true guidance feels like. Not as something given to you, but something awakened within you. The absence of the father was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of your return to your own authority. There's a moment in every child's life when the silence of the father becomes a story. You remember the day you looked for his eyes and found only distance. You remember the way his presence filled the room, but never your heart. From that moment on, your soul began weaving meaning into the emptiness, believing that something in you must be unworthy of love, that maybe if you were quieter, better, more perfect, he would finally see you. That's how the father wound begins, not as an event, but as a conclusion your heart wrote to explain why warmth never came. As years pass, this story grows roots in the subconscious. You stop expecting protection. You stop trusting that anyone will stay. And slowly, the silence that once belonged to him becomes your own. You begin to protect yourself from love by staying hidden. You smile when you want to cry. You say, "I'm fine," when your soul screams for guidance. The world starts to see your strength, but it's a strength built on self-abandonment. You've learned to survive without a father, but you've forgotten how to let life guide you. Then one day, without realizing it, you start repeating his patterns. You attract partners who withdraw emotionally, bosses who don't see your worth, friends who disappear when you need them most. Each one mirrors that original wound, the unspoken message, you are on your own. And the irony is painful. While trying to escape your father's shadow, you end up living inside it. The wound becomes your map. Every time you think you're moving away from the pain, you're tracing its outline again. But what if this repetition isn't a curse? What if it's a coded message from your soul, urging you to look deeper? Jung called this the process of individuation, the soul's way of reclaiming what was lost through self-awareness. The wound repeats until it becomes conscious, because only then can it transform. Every relationship that breaks, every silence that hurts, every moment you feel unseen is the soul whispering, "Look here, this is where the healing begins." And if you pause long enough to listen, something extraordinary happens. You start to see the story for what it really is. Not proof that you were unloved, but evidence that your soul came here to learn how to love itself without conditions. The father who could not protect you became the mirror that would one day reveal your inner protector. The silence wasn't punishment, it was the doorway through which your own voice would finally enter. According to Jung, the father isn't just a person, he's an archetype, a symbol of inner order and conscious direction. He represents the structure that holds chaos, the voice that names the world, the principle that transforms instinct into purpose. When the external father is absent, this archetype remains dormant, waiting to be activated from within. That's why people with a wounded father complex often feel lost, drifting through life without a clear sense of destiny. It's not that they lack potential, it's that they haven't yet met the father inside themselves. This inner father is the energy that says, "You can do this. You belong in the world." But when it's missing, the mind fills the void with confusion and self-doubt. You second-guess your every decision. You seek validation before moving. You fear failure because there's no inner voice reminding you that mistakes are part of becoming. The result is paralysis, a life guided by hesitation instead of conviction. In Jungian terms, this is the collapse of the animus, the masculine principle that provides logic, vision, and confidence. Without this internal structure, your psyche tries to borrow direction from others. You follow mentors, ideologies, or partners with almost religious devotion, hoping they'll provide the compass your father never gave you. But no external authority can permanently fill an internal void. Sooner or later, each one disappoints you, and you're left face to face again with the original silence. That's when the deeper truth begins to surface. The guidance you've been searching for was never supposed to come from someone else. Healing begins the moment you realize that the father is not someone you must find, he's something you must build. Every time you take responsibility for your path, every time you make a choice aligned with truth instead of fear, the archetype awakens. The same energy that once seemed missing starts to rise within you as clarity, focus, and self-trust. You stop seeking a guide, because you've become one. You stop chasing validation, because your own inner voice finally carries authority. And when that happens, the silence of the past transforms. What once felt like abandonment becomes initiation. The father who couldn't lead you externally became the catalyst that forced your spirit to grow its own backbone. Jung would call this the sacred paradox, the way the psyche uses pain as material for consciousness. You no longer carry the wound as a curse, you carry it as proof of evolution. The father is no longer missing, he's finally alive in you. What if the story of your life didn't begin with birth, but with choice? What if, before taking this form, your soul looked across countless possibilities and said, "That one, that father, that silence, that exact kind of absence, is the path that will awaken me." To the human mind, it sounds cruel. To the soul, it's sacred precision. We don't choose comfort before we awaken, we choose catalysts. Every father who didn't protect, every man who couldn't stay, every moment you were left alone, all of it was part of a contract signed in light. A promise that through separation, you would remember connection. There's a deeper intelligence guiding every incarnation, an invisible rhythm that pairs us with the experiences our evolution demands. The father, in this plan, isn't just a parent, he's a mirror of divine law. Some come as warm protectors, others as distant initiators. Both serve the same sacred purpose, to awaken your ability to stand on your own axis. His silence wasn't neglect on a spiritual level, it was the soul's way of saying, "Now, it's your turn to speak." When you see this, the narrative of victimhood dissolves. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What for?" That shift changes everything. Because once you understand that the soul chose even the painful parts, resentment becomes unnecessary. You begin to forgive not because you're weak, but because you see the divine pattern behind the pain. Forgiveness isn't a moral act, it's the realignment of energy. It's saying, "I release the illusion that something went wrong." Through that release, your heart reclaims power from the past. The silence that used to hurt becomes a sacred sound, echoing with purpose. In that recognition, your father's image begins to change. He no longer appears as the man who failed, but as the soul who agreed to play a difficult role in your awakening. The one who embodied absence so that you could meet presence. The one who withheld validation so that you could learn to validate yourself. You start to see him through spiritual eyes, not as someone who broke you, but as someone who carried the weight of teaching you strength without words. That realization doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms its meaning. And when that happens, a quiet peace enters. You stop needing closure because you finally understand the architecture of your story. The soul doesn't make mistakes. It designs transformations disguised as suffering. The father wound was never about punishment, it was about preparation. The silence was the sacred training ground where your spirit learned to trust its own light. You didn't lose a father. You gained the map back to yourself. Healing doesn't begin with understanding. It begins with feeling. So now, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the younger version of yourself, the one who kept waiting for approval that never came. Maybe you can see them sitting in that small room, holding on to hope that someone would finally say, "I'm proud of you." Go to them now, in your mind. Don't just watch, enter the scene. You are the adult version they've been waiting for. You're the voice that never left. Sit beside them, and instead of offering explanations, offer presence. Say what your father couldn't: "You're safe. You're seen. You did enough." Feel the words vibrate in your chest, as if you're speaking them to your own soul. In that moment, something powerful happens. The body begins to release the memories stored in silence, the tension in your throat, the heaviness behind your ribs, the endless pressure to prove your worth. Each exhale becomes an act of forgiveness, not for your father, but for yourself, for the years you spent believing you weren't enough. You start to understand that healing the father wound isn't about rewriting the past, it's about reclaiming the parts of you that froze in it. You don't need to wait for an apology to be free. You just need to decide that the story ends differently now. Once that decision is made, energy moves. You begin to speak more clearly, stand more firmly, choose more consciously. The voice of hesitation starts to fade, replaced by an inner authority that feels calm, grounded, true. The father you once searched for externally now speaks from within, not as judgment, but as guidance. He's the one reminding you to keep your promises, to honor your path, to walk with dignity even when no one is watching. This is the rebirth of the inner father, not the man you lost, but the energy you've reclaimed. From this point forward, your relationship with life itself begins to shift. You stop attracting situations that mirror abandonment because your frequency no longer carries it. You stop chasing mentors to fill a void that's already whole. You start to feel safe in your own presence, and that safety radiates outward. The same silence that once hurt becomes sacred space, where your intuition speaks louder than any external voice. You realize that your story wasn't about loss, it was about initiation. And as you breathe into that realization, there's only one thing left to say: thank you. Thank you to the father who couldn't stay, to the silence that taught you to listen, to the pain that built your strength. Every wound was a doorway, every absence was an invitation. The father wound didn't destroy you. It sculpted you into someone who no longer seeks validation to exist. You didn't just heal the wound, you became the healer. And from this point on, you walk not as the child who was hurt, but as the consciousness that chose to awaken. At the end of this journey, something profound becomes clear. Healing the father wound was never about fixing the past, it was about reclaiming your inner authority to shape the future. You realize that every person who enters your life, every challenge, every silence, has been part of a greater design pulling you toward yourself. The absence that once defined you now feels like open space, the fertile ground where your own strength took root. And suddenly, what once hurt now carries reverence, because without that pain, you would have never met this version of yourself. The one who no longer seeks permission to exist. The one who knows they belong. This understanding transforms how you move through the world. You begin to walk with quiet confidence, not because you have all the answers, but because you trust your own voice enough to listen. You stop running from the masculine energy within you, and instead allow it to merge with your intuition. The inner father and inner mother, structure and flow, begin to dance together. This is the alchemy Jung spoke of, the union of opposites within the soul. You are no longer divided. You are whole, integrated, sovereign. Every part of you now serves a purpose, even the ones you once tried to hide. When you look back, you'll see that the father wound was never an interruption in your path. It was the path. It guided you to develop the inner structure that no one else could give you. And as you heal, your presence becomes medicine for others. You'll start to notice how your calmness soothes chaos, how your grounded energy invites others to trust life again. You won't even need to speak about your healing. People will feel it. Because true authority doesn't shout. It simply is. So, as you step into the world from here, remember this. You are not defined by who couldn't love you. You are defined by the love you learned to give yourself in their absence. The Father lives within you now, not as a shadow, but as a guide. And every time you choose clarity over confusion, presence over avoidance, truth over fear, you honor that sacred lineage. You are the bridge between the past that wounded you and the future that will never repeat it. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight lift, the silence soften. The father wound has fulfilled its purpose. You no longer need to carry it, you only need to live the wisdom it gave you. You've met your own authority, and now, the journey continues, not from pain, but from power. You've become the voice you once waited to hear. And from this moment on, every step you take echoes with the strength of the Father within.